Okay, I want to go through a few of the issues that we have now. Now that we're moving on to the Civil Rights Unit. I've gotten the Holocaust essays, the Shoah essays, and I'll be looking over those this week. And now we need to move on to the civil rights issues and go through the three readings we have. Now, these readings are quite distinct, even though they're around the same time period, and they're from three individuals who were quite familiar with the writings of each other. They really have a very different perspective on the same basic issue that we're going to be reading about. Washington is a major figure at this time, and we're talking about the later 19th century, meaning the later 1800s, early 1900s, around the turn of the century. He is an extremely famous just person, period. He may be the best known individual in the United States, along with Teddy Roosevelt, because he's so well known on such an important topic, which was civil rights at the time. And it was the primary issue really involving the whole nation. So he was extremely well known at this time, and known pretty much by all Americans. And, he often had dinner with the presidents and advised governors and other things of that matter. Du Bois is, and I should mention also, Washington set up the Tuskegee Institute that many of you know about, have heard about, with the Tuskegee Airmen. And yes, they did come from there. So he set up that university, and it was focused around vocational education to get people ready to be carpenters, bricklayers, and other things at a very skilled level, essentially at an applied level of engineering. So Du Bois is coming along, and I should also mention Washington's coming from a slave background. He was born into slavery, but he was freed around 9 years old. He has primarily positive memories of when he was a slave. He doesn't have memories of a lot of violence against him or his family. He does remember his mom working almost endlessly, and the amount of effort that that had to be put forward. But it's primarily a fairly, I hesitate to say positive, but in his autobiography, Up from Slavery, he does not have a lot of negative things to say about his experience with slavery. Now, mind you, he's very clear about the violence that was used against African Americans at the time. So he knew exactly what it was about and what was going on. But he doesn't have as many harsh things to say about it as others do. Du Bois is coming from a very different background. Du Bois is a Northerner, born free from a mixed background, but he is black as far as he appears black, even though he comes from a mixed white and black background. He appears African American, and he's a Northerner, and he went to Harvard, and he's extremely well educated in classics and philosophy, and really he, with the Philadelphia study that he put together to study poverty, is considered by many to be the kind of the foundation of sociology today. So you're dealing with a very well-educated man who approaches things from a very different perspective than, say, Booker T. Washington does. And he, again, born free into an upper-middle-class family and extremely well-educated. So his writings are coming along right when Booker T. Washington is at his height. And Du Bois is becoming a well-known intellectual. And he criticizes, in the essay we're going to read of Mr. Booker T. Washington and others, he criticizes the work of Washington because it delays the achievement of civil rights. Now, it's very important to understand that he delays it. Washington is willing to make compromises in the short term to achieve longer term goals. Du Bois is very adamant that you do not compromise on civil rights. And we'll go through this as we read cover the readings of both Washington and Du Bois. Both of them are aware of what's going on throughout the United States. And they both know about the lynchings. They both know about the history of slavery. They're both well respected. Washington is undeniably better known in his time period. It's very odd that he's not as well known today. And quite honestly, the one who has had the lasting impact is Du Bois, not Washington. If you go through and listen to the speeches from the 60s of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, you're going to hear echoes of what Du Bois wrote about, okay, in both of them. You're going to hear the echoes of it. You won't hear so much the echoes of Washington. And so as you follow this debate and go through it, what I'll want you to do, and I want to be very clear about this, stay away from today's issues. Stay away from today's issues that are going on with race. Do these two writers have things that apply to today's situation? Of course they do. Okay? Of course they do. And it's going to resonate without a doubt. But what I want people to do is understand Washington and Du Bois on their own terms first and foremost. And for this assignment, you'll be keeping them within their historical context, which is incredibly important, that you understand them as, as writers of their time. Now, Du Bois would go on to live until 1963, to a very good age. But his best-known writings, one of them is one of the ones you're reading, of Mr. Booker T. Washington and others. These were right around this time period, and they were engaging Washington's program. So I want you to keep them within their context. Look at what's going on. They are dealing at a time not with segregation, but with lynching. Lynchings were going on throughout the South and in the North, and actually throughout the United States. They were particularly intense in the South and going on. The person we're going to read to try to understand the context is Ida B. Wells. Okay, and so here are the readings. Let me take you to them. They're right here. Ida B. Wells is the writer, and let me open up this for you. And you can see it. And this is, again, you can use this as this is entirely for this unit, and I encourage you to print it off. It's not that long. I believe it's just up to around 45 pages or so at most. So Ida B. Wells, she's a reporter in her time period. This is Washington right there. This was published in 1899. And I put this together from his readings, from his writings. I'll tell you ahead of time, Washington's very easy to read. Everybody likes reading Washington. Whether or not you agree with him or not, it's all very clear and elegant writing. Okay, let me move myself over here a little bit. And then you get Du Bois. He is much more of a challenge to read. He goes into the history of civil rights in ways that aren't readily apparent to most folks. How people, Nels and others, push for civil rights. The figure of Frederick Douglass, who is huge in the civil rights struggle. Douglass, who escaped from slavery and took part in the Underground Railroad and other things, is a huge figure for Du Bois. But you won't hear about him from Washington as much. They knew of each other. And Washington, in a lot of ways, displaced Frederick Douglass. So Du Bois wants to go back to much of what Frederick Douglass was doing, which is much more assertiveness towards civil rights. And again, he goes through the history of it and other things. Now, and then finally, we have Ida B. Wells. This has been kind of interesting for me. I'm noticing that she's coming back. And there's been articles at the New York Times and other places covering her work, and I think that's fascinating. Now, she is not writing directly on Du Bois in Washington. What she's doing is writing newspaper accounts of the lynchings that are going on throughout the South. And this woman had quite a lot of bravery, to put it mildly, in writing about this. She was targeted for threats and other things. She experienced the discrimination firsthand. And not mildly. We're not talking about, name calling and things like that. She experienced it firsthand, and she writes about what the lynchings were about and what was going on in the time period of Washington and Du Bois. Washington and Du Bois are going to be more abstract. Wells is going to be straightforward, concrete, and what's going on. What we're going to be doing with this assignment. Okay, so those are the readings. Washington, Du Bois, and Wells. What the assignment's going to have you do is basically pick a side of either Washington or Du Bois. What is nearly impossible to do is find a middle ground. Because of the civil rights issue, they really see it essentially differently. Washington wants to go about it in stages. Focus on economics first, and we'll achieve greater equality, we'll achieve more respect, and then we'll get the vote and participation in juries and all these other things that were being denied to African Americans. Du Bois is absolute. Civil rights are not negotiable. They cannot be delayed. You strip people of their civil rights, you strip them of part of their humanity, and they cannot protect themselves. What we want to do here, or what I need you to do, is go through and really pick a side after you've considered both of them and considered them in light of Wells's writing. That's what we're doing. So I want you to read Washington and do your absolute best to understand him on his own terms. What is he writing about here? What is he doing? This man is not naive, or nor is he looking for problems. This is a man trying to solve social issues and political issues that are absolutely essential. And the same thing's going down with Du Bois. He's well aware of what's going on and trying to advocate a certain approach that must be followed to achieve basic equality. And then Wells puts it basically, this is what's going on around it. What you're going to do is try to understand both Washington and Du Bois, and then pick a side in light of what you read in Wells. What I don't want you to do is write about things that are going on today. We want to keep this within its historical context to understand the ideas. And again, I want to repeat, without a doubt, these writings have resonance for today. Without a doubt, okay? But I want you to keep them in a historical context and play it out. What you're going to be doing is going back and forth between Washington and Du Bois, Washington and Du Bois, and looking at how well they play off of Wells, what Wells is describing. So you might write your first body paragraph about Washington, your second one on Du Bois, third one on Washington, fourth one on Du Bois, or you might reverse the order and go Du Bois and Washington, Du Bois and Washington. But in each one, you're going to be bringing up what Wells is writing about. Your quotations are going to be from Washington and Du Bois. But I want you to refer to the situations that Wells describes. The lynchings throughout the South, throughout the Midwest, and Illinois and Ohio and places like that. I want you to refer to those to try to settle this issue and determine whom you think has the better, who you think has the better approach. Okay. So that's what we're doing with this unit. I've got the assignment posted here. You're going to be working carefully with Washington and Du Bois, working very carefully. And again, you can take either side. I really encourage you to understand them first, and then go with what you think is really better in light of what Du Bois, Wells is writing about. I, by the way, do have a bias in this. I definitely pick a side. I won't tell you yet, but I will tell you. But I want you to know what you need to do is take your approach, and I want to really emphasize that. Whomever you think really handles this issue better, go with it, okay? But just make sure it plays off well with Wells, which he's writing about, okay? So for the calendar, just so everybody's up to date on this, we're in October right now, and so we're beginning the civil rights readings, and we're going to start with Washington. We have the grammar quiz coming up on the 26th. That's coming up and looming. And then we're going to be doing the Du Bois. You're going to be summarizing Washington here on the 29th. Then Du Bois, and then Wells. And then the essay is going to be due. Let's see, it's in November. It's due on the 15th. So you've got a little bit of time. We are, by the way, right on track. We're actually slightly ahead, so we're doing fine. We're going to have the final essay on art history. Okay, that's what we're going to be doing at the end. So I would really encourage you to get the Washington going and get it taken care of pretty quickly, but also make sure you review and cover that chapter 2 from the grammar book. It's going to be on parts of speech. It's a lot of drill. You should know that by now from chapter 2. Make sure you get that done and get that quiz done. I'm going to allow you to really go through it, take your time. But you want to get really good grades on all these grammar quizzes, because that does add up by the end. So that grammar quiz is coming up, so just make sure you're ready for that. Really go through these readings carefully on the civil rights. Give me at least until Monday to get those Shoah essays recorded. I've got a little bit weighing on me this week with other duties. I'll try to get them recorded at the latest by Monday. If I can get them before then, I definitely will. And I will do the same. I will make videos for everybody to kind of tell you where you are and how you're doing, and give you advice on how to go through the writing process, okay? So that's where we are. Everybody's doing fine. I'll be going through this Showa essays and going through everything. Try to make sure that you are getting the discussions taken care of, not just in the civil rights one, but make sure you might even take a look. If you took all your discussions and copied and pasted them all into a Word file, because that's what we're going to be doing. If you copied them and pasted them all into a Word file and double-spaced it, take a look and see how much writing you have, because you don't want this creeping up on you at the end and find out you're coming up short. Some of you have really been detailed in your discussions, and I appreciate that. That's great. Some of you have had discussion posts that have been kind of short. It's really going to get you at the end of this semester. So make sure if you've got some short ones, go back and add a little bit more. Explain, Simon Srebnick a little bit better, or Franz Sukomo and things like that. And again, remember that you just got to write about it and do your best with it. Okay? So make sure those discussions are in good shape. Make sure you do a good job with this one. We only have 3 readings. We usually have about 4 separate things we can write about. This one we only have 3. And then we're going to have art history in the last one. So make sure that those discussion postings are in good shape and keep on it. And keep on it with the grammar. Be patient with the Showa ones. I'll get those done as quickly as I can and get those videos out to you too. But everybody keep on it. I do hope you enjoy the next unit and get through that grammar quiz. I know you can't enjoy a grammar quiz, but I hope it goes well for you, okay? All right, take care, folks.